The CART FedEx Championship is the most diverse and challenging racing series in the world. To be crowned champion, a driver must prove himself on every type of circuit over 19 races on 4 continents. The 2002 CART FedEx Championship was a season of change and one of drama. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha.
And I'm Tommy Kendall. Welcome to the 2002 Year in Racing CART FedEx Champions Series edition.
Over the next hour, our season-long broadcast team here on Speed. To my left, Derek Daly. Next to him, Calvin Fish and Scott Pruitt. Sitting to TK's right, we'll take you through the season, one of transition and enormous uncertainty for the Champ Car set.
And that's right. We also had a new qualifying format, legalization of traction control, new pit stop regulations, as well as the usual high expectations among the drivers and teams. And that was just the stuff that happened off the track.
And all those new regulations had an impact, beginning with the very first race of the season, Monterrey, Mexico, in early March. The event began with local hero Adrian Fernandez setting fast time in both rounds of qualifying and picking up 2 new bonus championship points. At the start of the race, Fernandez led Paul Tracy down into turn 1, but just a few corners later, our first big incident of the year involving rookie Townsend Bell, Kenny Brack, and Jimmy Vasser. The first of many such incidents on the season. Fernandez led for the first 14 laps before Alex Tagliani charged by in turn 8. Tagliani's teammate Patrick Carpentier was the first driver to fall afoul of the new CART pit stop rules. He was black flagged while leading for missing his pit window. Once the stop cycled through, Cristiano D'Amata found himself out front, surviving this scary moment with Shinji Nakano. And D'Amata went on to win the race for the second consecutive year. So it was a great first weekend, kicking off a season of record attendance on the CART FedEx Championship Trail. And Scott Pruitt, Chris Pook made it clear over the winter when he took over as CEO that things were going to change, and they did.
They did. With all the rule changes that came about, I thought that was terrific for this series. Ironically enough, with the first race of the year, almost all these rules were impacted. First, we saw Christian Fittipaldi, the fastest guy in qualifying, brought out a red flag, lost his fastest lap. Second day qualifying, rained out. Not rained out, but certainly a rain situation. The quickest guy on Friday moved forward and started on the pole, ironically enough, was Adrian Fernandez. And then in the race, with the new strategies, the pit and the minimum pit lap window, was crazy. But for all these things to happen in the first race, I thought was terrific.
And Scott, the qualifying sessions this year were 60 minutes long, everyone out together. They had 15 laps, 2 sets of Bridgestone tires to use up, but everyone was looking for that little edge, so everyone waited in the session. They wanted the track to rubber in, and consequently, everyone was out there together at the end of the session. Everyone's cursing on the radio saying they couldn't get a clear lap. And it seemed like the drivers and the teams were unwilling to make the change for the following race weekends, but then CART made a stand. They changed that qualifying hour, brought out a short practice session, then a break, and then a 35 or 40-minute qualifying session, and that was very exciting typically throughout the season, TK.
What was most notable to me was what was behind all the changes, namely a shift within the organization itself. CART wasn't going to be resistant to change. They said we are going to be a responsive organization. So they didn't always make the right call. They weren't able to foresee some of the different permutations that the rules would create, but they said we are not going to sit by and let things just happen as they may. We're going to take charge of this, and I thought that was notable.
And one of the main changes, of course, that we saw immediately was to try and stop the economy runs. You had a mandatory pit stop that you had to stop and change all 4 tires. as the season wore on, Bob, I'm not sure that rule really played its hand the way they intended. I think you'll see that change for next year.
Well, no question about it. Adapting to new situations was a big theme of the season. We've just scratched the surface of the 2002 Champ Car campaign, so stick around. When we come back, we'll rate the one-season experiment with traction control. No more slipping and sliding for the Champ Cars. And most teams switched from Reynard chassis to Lola once the season began. Why did some teams do so more successfully than others? We'll talk about it. Stay with us. Welcome back to our CART FedEx Championship Year in Racing here on Speed Channel. A hot topic in CART for nearly a decade has been traction control, a technology using sensors hooked to a computer to detect and eliminate wheel spin. Unable to police it, late in the off-season, CART decided to legalize it for 2002, leaving the manufacturers very little time to perfect their systems, if they weren't already using them, before the season opener in Mexico. Round 2 of the season took the teams to Long Beach, California. First race on home soil, and who better to lead the field from pole than Jimmy Vasser, his first pole since Michigan in 1999. Cristiano D'Amata led a race-high 31 laps and was looking to win his 4th consecutive race over 2 seasons, but collided with Adrian Fernandez in the pits and was not a factor thereafter. Pitting off sequence worked to race leader Michael Andretti and Max Pappas's advantage. When Mario Dominguez wrecked, it opened the door of opportunity, allowing them to make their final stop and stay up front. In the end, Andretti and Vasser posted the first 1-2 finish for Americans since 1996, when it was Vasser and Parker Johnstone. Pappas finished 3rd, giving Sigma Autosport their first podium.
CART made its first overseas trip of 2002 to Twin Ring Motegi, Japan. At the race start, a battle of Japanese manufacturers as Honda-powered Tony Kanaan wrestled the lead from Bruno Junqueira's Toyota. It was then Honda versus Honda as Paul Tracy tries Kanaan for the lead around the outside. But then bad news for the Hondas. Paul Tracy's Lola breaks an upright. His day was done after 84 laps. And then suddenly Kanaan was out. Led 72 laps, but his 3rd DNF in as many races. And that gave the win to Bruno Junqueira, his 2nd of his career, first time a Japanese manufacturer wins at Motegi. Then on to round 4 at Milwaukee, and Paul Tracy shows he almost won the Indy 500. Also, it was Scott Dixon's first race with Target Chip Ganassi. At the race start, you see Paul Tracy sweeps around pole sitter Adrian Fernandez to take the lead. But again, bitter disappointment for Tony Kanaan, 4th DNF in as many races for Mo Nunn Racing. Another bad day for Dario Franchitti. He clouts the turn 2 wall, his first outing in the Lola. Tracy, meanwhile, would go on to lead 184 of 250 laps and take his first win of the season and his 3rd victory at the famous Milwaukee Mile. And of course, he smoked the opposition, and then the mandatory celebration donuts, Bob.
So Dario Franchitti fell to 2nd in points, while Michel Jourdain Jr. became the first Mexican driver to lead the championship since Adrian Fernandez back in 1998. Now, that win in Milwaukee was important, the first for Team Green using the Lola chassis. When the Reynard company started to flirt with bankruptcy, a lot of teams switched to the Lolas. Some did it better than others. TK, why is that?
Well, I mean, the best example is Tony Kanaan. Those guys really struggle with it, but you really have to tip your hat to Team Cool Green. Think about what they did this year. They were running 3 cars already, Team Green, not Team Cool Green, 3 cars already. They had their full Indy program keeping them busy during the month of May. Then they had the Lola switch mixed in, and that just really shows the depth of Team Cool Green to respond that way. As important as the depth of the team, though, I think the car matched up pretty well with the driver. Both Paul Tracy and Michael Andretti really demand a lot of their car mid-corner to get speed out of the racetrack, and the Lola really matched up well with that.
Absolutely, TK. I mean, when they went to Motegi, Paul had never driven the Lola. Michael had already tested it at Homestead. On his 3rd lap in the car, he's the fastest man on the racetrack. And I spoke to him at the end of that session. He was just beaming with confidence about the move to the Lola. He really loved how it felt on the racetrack. The flip side of that, of course, is the engineering aspect of the car for the teams. Certainly the durability was an issue, as we saw in the race with the upright failure on PT's car.
And you have to remember, racing is a very fashionable business. If they think it's faster and a majority of the owners are making the move, racing teams are a bit like sheep. They all follow each other down the same path.
And a lot of them went for the Lola. Of course, Cristiano D'Amata began his season in the Lola and was quick everywhere except the early season ovals. So with the natural terrain circuits looming, the stage was set for a record run by D'Amata. More of the Year in Racing coming up. Oh, there goes the motor in the biggest possible way. Through turn 6 and up the hill on the racing line is Cristiano D'Amata. That will not win him any popularity contests.
I mean, it was the most unsportsmanlike thing I've ever seen in my life. A guy blows an engine, then he drove another mile on the whole, just stayed on the line, dripping oil for another mile. Got to be thrown out of the series.
Well, Cristiano D'Amata certainly didn't win many friends by oiling down the track at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca to escape a red flag penalty in qualifying. But Derek, he did earn his first career Champ Car pole position.
Yes, he did. But Bob, I did that interview, and it was a memorable moment, let's say. It was a great spontaneous interview because it really captured the emotion. But what most people don't know is, right as he blurted out that first word, a big old spit left his mouth and went whoop and right over there on top of me. So as you can imagine, Tommy, it was a memorable moment. We call that occupational hazard, right?
This just in, headlines in the Enquirer, Daly and Ganassi swap spit. I'd been like, hey, Chip, say it, don't spray it, buddy. But this was an important part of the season for me. It's when things really started to get good, the niceties kind of started to fall away and the emotion came through. And it didn't matter which side you were on. If you're a Ganassi fan, you agreed with him. If you're a D'Amata fan, you're like, Ganassi's the biggest buffoon ever. They were both right, but this is where the season got good for me.
And it was another example of teams adapting to the situations. D'Amata wanted that pole, did not want to bring out that red flag, had to get the car back to the pits. But no matter which side of the controversy you choose, with the happenings of Saturday's qualifying, the fact was Cristiano D'Amata started from his first pole. Of course, the next difficult task was to get through turn 1. And as it turned out, Dario Franchitti and Adrian Fernandez would tangle, sparking a 6-car pileup. As a result, Franchitti's retirement would drop him from 2nd to 5th in the points, while Adrian Fernandez leaving the race meant fellow Mexican Michel Jourdain Jr. became the only car driver to finish every race of the season to that point. Dario's teammate Paul Tracy didn't fare so well on the day either. The left rear wheel and tire detached from the car, sending him into the tire wall and forcing him to do a little housekeeping on the racetrack. Cristiano D'Amata went on to dominate the Shell 300, leading a personal single race high 82 of the 87 laps. Christian Fittipaldi finished second, giving Newman Haas their first 1-2 since 1999. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Year in Racing, featuring the CART FedEx Championship Series. The first 5 races of the season saw 4 different winners, but one man was about to put a stranglehold on the top step of the podium. It took not 1, not 2, but 4 tries at the start before the race went green in Portland, Oregon. On the inside of turn 1, Kenny Brack, whose dicing with Cristiano D'Amata led to all those restarts, grabbed the lead as cars scattered everywhere. Brack controlled the race, but after his second pit stop, he lost the left rear wheel and any shot at a victory. Cristiano D'Amata took over and went on to the win, becoming the first driver to capture all 23 available championship points on a road course weekend. Chicago Motor Speedway saw Dario Franchitti lead from pole, but it was Brack who tried to go around the outside of Jimmy Vasser and about 12 other guys, and both wound up hard into the wall. 67 laps into the race, first round of pit stops, leader Franchitti has a costly slow stop problem at the right front wheel. That handed the lead briefly to Christian Fittipaldi, but on the next round of stops, it was Fittipaldi who lost his left rear, stranding him on the racetrack. Similar situation for Scott Dixon at Target Ganassi, but he wouldn't get too far down the pit lane before losing the left rear. At the front, Cristiano D'Amata took his 4th win of the year, 3rd consecutive, 1st of the season on an oval.
To be where we were off in Japan and to be winning a race right now, it's a pretty big difference. It's a pretty long way we came to get here.
Yeah, the car was awesome all day. We definitely had the car to beat. We just made mistakes, and until we stop doing that, we're not going to win races.
Nice haircut for Cristiano Damata. Tough situation, though, for Dario Franchitti, and he wasn't one of those guys who lost a wheel. How did this happen, Scott?
Well, what we're seeing with the rule changes for the pit stops, the teams were being forced to make pit stops quicker. Unfortunately, what we saw was a lot of guys making mistakes. Now, a few times we caught, I know Calvin and I were right there in the pits, and we caught these guys. One of the tires guys going, no, don't send them, don't send them. But the guy wasn't paying attention at the front, and unfortunately sent them anyway, causing him wheels to fall off the car.
And for Dario Franchitti, Scott, he won 3 races, but potentially could have won 3 more. Monterey, Mexico, the first race of the season. You know, he was in contention for the win, had a slip up in the pit lane there. The air jack came disconnected, eventually finished second behind Damata. Then when we went to Chicago, we saw the fumble there, finished on the podium again. And then in Mexico City, Bob, the final round of the championship, he was leading, came into the pits, missed his pit box by about 18 inches, but that was enough to drop him from first all the way back to 5th. But it's hard to feel sorry for Dario when you have Ashley just waiting at home.
Well, getting back on track, eventually CART instituted a rule. If you lose a wheel on track, you lose a lap. Then it was on to Toronto, and time to reacquaint ourselves with an old friend. Alex Zanardi, former champion, visiting, recovered from those horrendous injuries in Germany last year. And the intense eyes of starter Zanardi proved they haven't lost their focus. He waved off the first attempt at starting the race. Second attempt, all was well. Cristiano Damata jumped into the early race lead, setting a torrid pace that would be hard to beat. Second place Paul Tracy was up to the challenge for a while until he developed a braking problem and had a series of spins. Chip Ganassi hot shoe Bruno Junqueira chased down Damata, but then watched his hopes dissolve when rookie Townsend Bell clobbered him from behind with 20 laps to go. Chief Steward Wally Dallenbach parked the rookie for the rest of the race for that mistake. In the end, Damata led all 112 laps, taking the win and earning a place in CART history, tying Al Unser Jr. and Alex Zanardi, becoming the 3rd driver to win 4 consecutive races. So with his closest rivals going out, Damata opened up a whopping 48-point lead in the driver's standings. The battle for 3rd, however, remained tight, with Kenny Brack and Christian Fittipaldi scoring some much-needed points. More from the 2002 CART season when we return. Welcome back to the CART Year in Racing. Now, by the midpoint of the season, Cristiano Damata certainly looked untouchable, Derek.
And with 5 wins and a solid points lead, he and his Newman Haas team had the field covered. That is until a brief stretch in the heart of the season.
Beginning at Burke Lakefront Airport in Cleveland, starting from pole position, Damata was on his way to make CART history until lap 20. He succumbed to mechanical failure. Now, Damata's misfortune allowed for an extremely strong Dario Franchitti to give chase until his ride expired, as it had done in qualifying. Patrick Carpentier benefited from all this and an earlier pit strategy, stretching his fuel load and then turning in some blistering laps en route to his 2nd career win and his first ever on a road course.
Then Vancouver saw Townsend Bell sidelined at Patrick Racing in favor of Spaniard Oriol Servia. In qualifying, we saw a rare problem for Cristiano Damata, and his Newman Haas team on Friday were forced to wheel the car away. Then a very scary moment here for Bruno Junqueira. Has a suspension failure on Friday, hit the wall. He was okay, would eventually qualify in 12th place. Then on race day, Damata start from the pole, and another first lap incident, believe it or not, for Kenny Brack and Jimmy Vasser. Damata would only make 64 laps before being sidelined with a broken drive shaft. Then another scary moment. This is on a restart. Patrick Carpentier loses it on cold tires, almost gets away with it, but behind him, disaster breaks out. Alex Tagliani, Bruno Junqueira, and Fernandez all come together. The red flag came out while Fernandez was removed from his car with a fractured pelvis. Once the race was restarted, it was all Dario Franchitti taking his first win of the season, followed closely by Paul Tracy and Tony Kanaan. And then we moved to Mid-Ohio. The weekend started off as a rough one for Bruno Junqueira, who had his quick lap taken away for disobeying a red flag in qualifying. He claimed, of course, that he was held up on his fast runs by the players' Forsyth cars at Carpentier and Tag.
You know that 8 times the pole winner has won this race.
If I win another race, man, I'm gonna run the track naked or something.
Well, the score would be settled on Sunday with Patrick Carpentier starting on the pole and setting the pace of the race at the green flag. Now, due to the placement of Carpentier's pit before the scoring line, the only lead changes that occur were on the pit stops. But the Players Foresight team kept their man ahead for the full day. Then D'Amata makes a rare mistake and buries himself in the gravel trap. He would manage to get out and continue, but he finished a non-point paying 13th. But Carpentier would claim his second win of the season.
It was good. Both races we pushed him hard at Mid-Ohio, and he made a mistake. So no, it was really good, especially on road course, because for me I never won on a road course, never even finished in top 3, I think. So it's very satisfying, and it was a big change for me, so it was good.
And of course, then afterwards, he had to make good on his promise that he said he would be naked. That doesn't look very naked to me. However, maybe somewhat daring, Bob.
Proving once again to be careful what you wish for. So after a hot start to the season, championship leader Cristiano D'Amata scored just 4 points over 3 races, but he was lucky. Again, his closest rivals failed to take advantage of his stumble. Well, one did. Carpentier swept both races in Ohio and made a big move to second in the points. And TK, it's kind of interesting. We thought Patrick Carpentier's job was at stake. Couple of wins. Suddenly, he's the prettiest girl at the big dance.
Well, that's true. When they rolled into Cleveland, the handwriting was pretty much on the wall that Paul Tracy was going to sign with Players and Tagliani was going to be retained, had another year left on his contract. Well, about the same time, it's not a surprise to me that he adopted a carefree attitude, says, I have nothing to lose. Well, that's about the time he started winning. By the time they rolled into Montreal, he had a hero's welcome, and it was almost like he was saying, go ahead, don't re-sign me.
You know, what I liked about Cleveland is all the sheep suddenly that follow down the Lola path. Now see the Reynard running fast and able to win races. So Derek Walker, who took the chance to buy all the assets of that bankrupt company, now thought maybe I can sell some cars for next season.
Which made it more technically interesting once again. Now, Calvin, let's take a look at the other side of the coin. Newman Haas Racing, very few points for Cristiano D'Amata. Did he suddenly shift into conservative mode as opposed to charging?
Well, I think 8 races through the season, Bob, he'd won 5, he'd won 4 in a row, and everyone was talking about total domination, particularly on the road courses. And could anyone beat Cristiano? Well, on the racetrack, no one seemed to have the speed, but 2 mechanical DNFs. We had the blown engine at Cleveland, we had the drive shaft failure at Vancouver, and then a very uncharacteristic mistake by Cristiano chasing down Patrick at Mid-Ohio. And after that, it really seemed to change the approach. I think maybe subconsciously, Scott, Newman Haas and Cristiano changed their way for the rest of the season.
Well, Newman Haas came back with a big win at Elkhart Lake. That was good for the team, good for Cristiano, but also you felt like they kind of changed their focus. It wasn't about winning, it was about finishing the top 5, focusing on that championship. And even for the rest of the season, watching the team work together, I really felt like they lost that edge about going out and trying to win races. It was more about finishing. Even at the end, they might have picked it up a little bit, but it didn't feel like they had that edge they did at the start of the year.
Well, as Scott mentioned, Elkhart Lake provided a big boost for the championship leader. Here's a look at the highlights of Road America. It marked the return to the cockpit of Adrian Fernandez after missing 1 race due to his injuries at Vancouver. The weekend began with a few bizarre incidents. Tony Kanaan loses his rear wing and its downforce on the front straight. He goes into the gravel and the tire wall. Amazingly, he was unhurt. Mario Dominguez also had a big meeting with the tires in turn 14. He too was okay. Then in qualifying, already on pole but looking for a quicker lap, Bruno Junqueira got it wrong. The ever-quotable Chip Ganassi. On to the race start, Junqueira on pole, but on the first lap into turn 5, who else but Paul Tracy would come calling on the outside and pass for the lead. Tracy was looking good from there until he got down into Canada Corner later in the race and had a very controversial coming together with Kenny Brack. Through solid work and hard driving, Cristiano D'Amata outdrove the field and picked up his 6th victory in 12 races thus far. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to our Kart Year in Racing. The end of summer saw the Champ Cars take on 2 brand new tracks on back-to-back weekends.
One Montreal has been used in the past by Formula One, while the other, Denver, was a completely new street circuit.
Round 13 saw CART venture into the realm of Formula One in beautiful Montreal, where they attracted a massive crowd. In fact, we were told the crowd was artificially kept down to keep from embarrassing Formula One. As in the case of the Grand Prix cars, some fell victim at turn 1. In this case, Kenny Brack, who was an innocent bystander when Paul Tracy miscalculated his braking point. After the first round of stops, it became apparent that the inaugural running would be a two-horse race between Cristiano D'Amata and Dario Franchitti. In the end, Franchitti would take the checkered flag, increasing his tally of career CART victories to 9. And by the way, that number 27 he wore, of course, was made famous on the Ferrari of Gilles Villeneuve.
Then on to Denver, and some very interesting lines by many of the drivers. Very little grip on this track, and we saw spin after spin. This is Jimmy Vasser, this is Paul Tracy, this is Tony Kanaan, oh, this is Bruno Junqueira, Christian Fittipaldi. At this stage, Paul Tracy was almost dizzy. He spun so many times. However, after all that practice, the start was a clean event, at least through the first 2 or 3 turns. Then we got to turn 5, and Tracy mugs his teammate, Dario Franchitti. Believe it or not, Paul Tracy gets away with it, and Dario, well, he drives away for lunch. Tough break, though, coming up for Christian Fittipaldi. He was running in a very good 3rd place, and the car fell off the jacks during this critical pit stop. At the front, though, Scott Dixon was all over Bruno Junqueira, but team orders kept him from challenging Bruno, and Bruno went on to take his 3rd Champ Car win of his season.
So with Dario Franchitti not scoring any points in Denver, he fell 69 behind Cristiano D'Amata with 5 races remaining. While he wasn't mathematically eliminated, the Scotsman's hopes of the championship looked to be getting slimmer and slimmer. So his run-in with teammate Paul Tracy in Denver was indeed a costly one.
Now, Tracy and Franchitti have had several run-ins during their 4+ years as teammates. It started back in Houston in 1998, then Gateway in 99, and again in Chicago in the year 2000. But Denver this year was Franchitti's championship bid really thrown out the window, Tommy.
It really was. I mean, you talk about momentum, and they had come off a big win in Montreal, came there, they didn't qualify well, but just really took the wind out of their sails. And I think Dario is very close with Paul off track, but I think you throw up your hands, and it's kind of like, that's Paul. And what can you do? The same thing that leads to those insane passes at Elkhart Lake sometimes leads to this, but it definitely was a big blow to their championship.
Well, as bad as that day felt for Dario, he would have a big one when the Tour made its only European stop of the season. Rockingham Motor Speedway in Corby, England saw Kenny Brack control the race up to the final round of pit stops. Dario Franchitti was off sequence for most of the race, reached his pits first, but in Brack pits, trouble. Watch the left rear. The crewman can't get it on. Here comes Dario, who passes in the pit lane to take over the race lead. And at the end, Dario Franchitti picked up his 3rd victory of the year, his first ever on an oval. And best of all, he won on home soil. Coming up, the Champ Cars return to the streets of South Florida. How was the event in Miami received? Depends on whom you ask. The Champ Car Series visited 4 new circuits in 2002, with each presenting its own challenges, none more so than the streets of Miami, Florida. On Saturday morning, the crews went to work cutting up the racetrack to replace slick asphalt at the apexes of several corners, and grip was in very short supply all weekend. Welcome back to our CART season in review. Gentlemen, I think we all agree that Miami was a great race, but we need to do something to help the show, Calvin.
Well, Miami was the 3rd of 4 new venues that we were going to this year, and all 3 had been a great success. Montreal, big crowds there. The fans loved the race. They loved the access that they had to the teams and the drivers, something they don't see with the Formula One circus in town. Then we went to Denver, a lot of bumps there, but people typically like the configuration of the racetrack. Miami, too tight. Turns 3 through 6, they need to change that. They're going to do that for next year, head north on Biscayne Boulevard. But Scott, the real key at both Denver and Miami is to try and find some grip in the race cars, something that the teams and drivers really struggled with on both weekends.
And don't forget, Calvin, Bridgestone is the only tire manufacturer involved, and some of these new circuits I think were ultra conservative, too conservative in my view, which takes away from the racing. They come back next year and years to come, I think they're going to be more aggressive, come with a softer compound, which is going to add to better racing. And once again, voila, we spice up the show. Now let's take a look at the highlights of round 16, featuring the familiar face of former series champion Juan Pablo Montoya
atop the flag stand. He flagged the field away as Tony Kanaan took the race lead from his first pole of 2002 and held that lead until this controversial collision with Scott Dixon, bringing out the yellow flag. Cristiano Damata took over the lead. Bruno Junqueira was called in a lap early, meaning he'd need 2 more stops. That would dampen his hopes of keeping the championship from Damata. Same for Dario Franchitti, mathematically in the hunt until he spun. Dario's caution aided Bruno until he had this collision with Kanaan. In the end, Cristiano Damata survived the carnage to take his 7th victory of the season, and with it, the championship and his first Vanderbilt Cup. Now, Damata becomes the 3rd Brazilian to win the kart championship, following Emerson Fittipaldi in 1989 and Gilles de Ferran in 2000 and 2001. But Damata clinched his in just his 3rd season in a champ car to de Ferran's 5 seasons and Emo's 6. Cristiano Damata's champ car career began in 1999 with PPI Motorsports, running the then underpowered Toyota engine. In that season, Damata earned a best finish of 4th. The following year, Damata scored his first victory at Chicago Motor Speedway. He then moved to the front-running Newman Haas team for 2001. The season began and ended on a winning note, but lost direction mid-season. This year, Damata again started on a high note and never looked back, but he acknowledges he didn't do it alone.
When you join a team like Newman Haas, they have so many good people. They have such a background, so many data, and just everything. And they really push you. And I really felt like I started to get a lot better as a driver since I joined the team. So it's been a relationship that really has been very easy, because it started well, and throughout the season we didn't have much struggle, although we had some. For example, through the ovals on the beginning part of the season we were really slow, so we fixed all that together, and we went through like many good times and very few bad times, which all makes it easier. But I think it's a relationship that definitely, I'm sure I couldn't do it by myself for sure.
Well, after winning the championship, Damata wasted no time putting the champion's #1 on his car, perhaps knowing this would be his only chance. Still to come, the Champ Cars make their annual visit to the wilds of Australia. But who could have guessed that the race would turn out to be as wild as it was? We'll be right back. Welcome back. One of the favorite stops on the kart calendar is that in Surfers Paradise, Australia. It's an event that must not be missed if given the opportunity, although the 2002 race did leave a bitter taste in the mouths of many of the competitors. You see, race day saw the first rain in months on the Gold Coast, and as the field went to green for what was supposed to be a single-file start, Bruno Junqueira attacked his pole-sitting buddy Cristiano Damata. In the spray behind him, Jimmy Vasser and Adrian Fernandez got together, and nearly half the field was involved, flying blind into what quickly became the most frightening kart crash in years. It was a 9-car mess, and another angle right here shows Toru Takagi's car actually landing upside down on that of Adrian Fernandez. Michael Andretti and Patrick Carpentier reacted instantly, coming to the aid of Jimmy Vasser, who was also on his head, in front of his father, who had come to watch the race, and this is what he saw. Now a look from Michael's onboard camera shows just how poor the visibility was. Jimmy Vasser was unhurt, but Adrian Fernandez cracked 2 vertebrae high in his neck, while Toru Takagi had minor fractures of the pelvis. 90 minutes later, the race was restarted, but it would go green for just 7 laps, at which point the rain worsened. The yellow flew again, and things really got weird. Damata and most of the leaders pitted on lap 10. The race had now been shortened to 50 laps, but became official at 36, half the original distance. Those guys would have to pit again. That gave the lead to Michael Andretti and Christian Fittipaldi, who pitted on lap 16. Lap 23, rookie Mario Dominguez makes what appears to be an inconsequential stop. 1 lap before the race became official, CART informed Kim Green and everyone else in the pit lane the race would go 41 laps. The winning strategy destroyed. Michael was forced to pit, ends up 9th. Dominguez inherits the lead, and after 7 green and 33 yellow flag laps, picks up his first career kart victory and the first for the Erdez team since it began life as Bettenhausen Racing back in 1986.
Just 1 week later, the boys were back in action in Southern California, and this is Jourdain. He blows up on lap 218, and his streak of consecutive points-paying finishes ends at 17. Then D'Amato's challenge ended when he blew up 19 laps shy of the finish. Michael Andretti then took the lead away from Jimmy Vasser with 8 laps to go. Then his teammate Dario Franchitti blew up with 3 laps to go, and CART threw the red flag. Everybody was forced to come into the pits. No serious mechanical work allowed on the cars. And on the restart, with 2 laps to go, Vasser gets a great run around the outside of Michael Andretti to take the win. A superb win for Vasser in the fastest kart race in history.
So in the space of 2 weeks, we went from the ridiculous to the sublime, and the officials had a lot to do with this. Now, granted, gentlemen, we have the benefit of hindsight, but TK, the officials really had a hand in both occasions. In Surfers Paradise, it all went wrong. In Fontana, we got a great finish.
Well, to understand surfers, you need to go back to the beginning of the year when they implemented some of these new rules, all with good intentions. As the year unfolded, we saw some unintended consequences of those rules, and Surfers was an example of that. They were really trapped. They didn't know how to end this based on where the red flag came out. Do you stop it at halfway? Hindsight, I think they should have stopped it at halfway. Fortunately, that bad taste did not last for long because we went on to California Speedway, and a rule that was put in place worked like it was supposed to, namely a red flag so you could end under green, which was a nice way to wash that Surfers Paradise bitter taste away.
Well, just as you and I know you can go from 0 to hero in a week, same thing for CART. One of the worst races in the history of CART. In fact, I think it's going to go into history books as the worst race ever for CART, to a superb race. And ironically, we go to Fontana. A year ago, the race did under yellow. The fans hated it. CART stepped forward and said, this is not going to happen again. Same thing happens. Very few laps to go. Yellow comes out. They bring out the red. The race does finish under the green, and just a superb race all day long. But for me, looking at those 2 races back to back, I mean, going from the worst to one of the best, Calvin.
Well, Scott, certainly the officials that day took a lot of heat about the decisions that they made, but really, no one really knew how bad the conditions were until they actually put their foot down at the green flag. Then there's huge spray. Adrian lifted a little bit. Jimmy clipped him, and then we saw the consequences of that massive crash with Adrian and Toro getting injured. Then they regrouped. Chris got all the guys together. Chris Knifelet's got all the guys together, told them what to do on the restart. The restart was clean. We then saw on lap 10 the conditions get much worse. They went full course yellow, and then they didn't know what to do. As TK mentioned, when do we end this thing? Lap 36 put it in the books as an official race. They didn't make that call then. Certainly Michael Andretti, Christian Fittipaldi were banking on that, so that made them very disgruntled. And then ultimately they picked the winner, which ironically was Mario Dominguez, who was heavily involved in that crash. So it was really a bad day for CART and the officials, something that they would like to forget. And Derek, I was certainly voting for staying down in Australia an extra couple of weeks.
Exactly. But unfortunately, that wasn't an option. Believe it or not, I spent quite a bit of time in the control tower, and I knew at that stage that there was a legal obligation to open up the racetrack on Monday morning. So the officials had a meeting with the promoter, and the promoter told him, you do run the race today. This is it. So they were almost forced into a corner and forced to get the race or get the laps run however best they could.
Tough day all around, but we should not leave Fontana without noting that it was the fastest 500-mile race in history at over 197 miles an hour in average speed. So with but 1 race remaining, there would be yet another first for the Champ Cars in 2002. The series headed south of the border to finish the season with its 2nd race in Mexico. But it was the first time the Champ Cars had run in Mexico City since 1981, and it turned out to be the country's biggest event in 3 decades. We'll be right back. Prior to the final race of the 2002 CART FedEx Championship season, Cristiano D'Amato announced that he would follow in the footsteps of fellow CART champions Jacques Villeneuve, Alex Zanardi, and Juan Pablo Montoya and move to Formula One. Given his close ties to Toyota, the only engine maker he had ever run with in CART, the announcement that he would join Toyota in Grand Prix racing was hardly a surprise. But with 1 race left in his Champ Car career, D'Amato remained as focused as ever. Record crowds jammed into the Hermano Rodriguez circuit for the final race of the 2002 season to witness a battle for the runner-up spot in the championship. And qualifying, fluid from Paul Tracy's expired engine sent his teammate Dario Franchitti into the wall. Bruno Junqueira went on to take pole position in front of that massive crowd for the final race of the year. When the race began, problems for Tony Kanaan. He attempted to leave the pits with the fuel rig still engaged. The resulting pit fire injured 4 of his crewmen. Happily, none of them seriously. Franchitti inherited the lead and would dominate the intermediate segment of the race, hoping to change his luck. But it would all go up in smoke when Dario pitted under yellow and overshot his pit marks. Kenny Breck went on to win the race. Sweet redemption, his first victory of the year and first ever on a road course. In the final points, Brazilian Bruno Junqueira clinched the runner-up spot in the championship behind his boyhood buddy Cristiano Romana. Patrick Carpentier finished third, his best Champ Car season to date, while Michael Andretti managed only 9th in the points, his worst season since 1985. Of course, Michael and some of the other top drivers are moving on next year, and in 2003, the face of kart will change.
While there's nothing wrong with the races as being team owners, I don't want to cast any aspersions there at all. But this is a changing world we live in, and it's a very rapidly changing world. And we really, you know, we need to bring new companies in to sponsor the cars, and we need to have the team owners who think like businessmen in today's world with those sort of sponsors that are coming on board.
Now, as we speak, 2 important sponsors have come aboard. Bridgestone Tires and Ford Cosworth will bring their massive marketing power to the kart series in 2003. But how about the drivers, guys? We heard Chris Pook say they need some new blood. A lot of big stars are leaving. What do you see happening, TK?
I mean, uncertainty is hard for people to deal with, but when I look back on my life in general and also racing, some of my greatest experiences came out of the most uncertainty. So I'm looking forward with kind of wide eyes, seeing who's going to come out of the pack. Who's the next Alex Zanardi? Where did Juan Montoya come from? So Dario Franchitti, for that matter. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but I think there's going to be new stars coming out of that. It's going to take a while to develop them, but I'm excited.
I think there's always going to be a lot of new blood coming along, and they need some new blood out there. Just as it hasn't taken overnight to ruin the series, it's not going to take overnight to fix it, and new blood always is going to make for better racing.
I think there's certainly going to be a lot of stability over the next couple of years with the engine package, what Chris has announced with the Ford Cosworth for 2 years, and also the fact there's a chassis freeze, Derek. I think it's going to give the opportunity for some new teams to get in there, certainly with some of the business enhancements as well.
And the chassis freeze was one of the type of decisions that Pook was able to make here as he stabilized the company. But I think what he has done, Bob, he has energized everybody. He has energized this group of owners. He's got rid of the dead wood. I mean, to my mind, all the owners who cashed out and put the money in their pocket and ran just goes to prove they should never have been in a position to make decisions on how kart was run in the past years, because they were self-serving measures, and a company for long-term planning can't have people like that making decisions.
Well, in a few moments, we'll take a look ahead at what's going to happen in 2003 in our eyes. But right now, we want to give you a look at the schedule for 2003. As we go to tape with this program, the race on the Rockingham Oval in Corby, England, has been removed from the schedule due to financial difficulties at the track. But CEO Chris Pook says kart remains committed to the European market, and it'll be interesting to see where they go. The Milwaukee and Fontana oval tracks are back, but at this point, just 2 oval circuits on the schedule for next year, with all of those events in Canada and Mexico and elsewhere around the world that produced over 2.6 million fans, a record season in attendance for kart. So, gentlemen, as we sum things up here in our year in racing, we heard so much this year that kart was dead. For my money, 2.6 million paying spectators through the gates this year tells you that's not likely to be the case. Your thoughts, TK?
I disagree, Bob. I've read it's dead. It's got to be dead. Those 2.6 million people are necrophiliacs. You can count me amongst them. I had a ball this year. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to know any better, but I've really had a great time with you guys this year.
It's been the best of times, it's the worst of times for kart. You're seeing just tremendous racing, tremendous events, and just what you touched on earlier, it took the owners multiple years to kill this series, or at least get it to a point where it is now. Chris Pook has come in, energized. When you get around him, he's just full of energy and excitement. You can't help but get caught up in it.
My final thought is if TK will ever make it on time for a production meeting in the mornings. But aside from that, it's been a lot of fun this year. I mean, it's been a very competitive season. I mean, when you look back and you look at D'Amata really dominating the middle of the season, but then everyone regrouped, they closed that gap, and then we saw some tremendous racing through the final few races.
If I'm to be really honest, I had the emotion roller coaster too. I was up and down on what kart may or may not do, but the bottom line is Pook had so much respect that I believed in him. And for the decisions that you've seen him make now to stabilize it, don't forget there's going to be many more decisions of excitement to come from Puch. And to me, I can't wait for 2005 to hear those V10 normally aspirated engines screaming down the streets of these high-speed tracks and places like Long Beach.
Well, we have 2 more seasons to talk about those new V10s on the horizon. As Tommy mentioned, it's been great fun for all of us as broadcasters in this, our first year working with championship auto racing teams here on Speed Channel. 2003 looks to be bigger and better, and as TK said, a little uncertainty was never really a bad thing. We hope you'll join us then, and we hope you've enjoyed this look at the season in racing on the CART FedEx Championship. For Tommy Kendall, Scott Pruitt, Calvin Fish, and Derek Daly, I'm Bob Varsha. So long, everyone.